This is Al. We are at the Kelly Writers House. Actually, we're all over the place, but I'm at the Kelly Writers House with a couple of friends whom I'll introduce in a minute. This is 10 years since the first webcast. I think to the day, 10 years. I don't even want to know, Chris and Zach, what the first webcast was like. Oh, it was crazy. But 10 years, and we should be celebrating 10 years of ModPo. But you know what? We're not going to. You know why? Anybody want, Lainey, why shouldn't we celebrate?
Because we're moving on. We're continuing.
That's very cool. That's too cool. That's a poetic response. How about a non-poetic response? Because if we had a big party here, no one would come.
Right.
Or they would come and have to sip champagne through the mask, which only Jake Marmer knows how to do, but everybody else doesn't. Jake is really perfecting this. But no, seriously, what we're going to do, and I think, Lily and Lainey and some others, we're going to think about how to do this right. What we're hoping for is a big blowout gathering in person here at the Writers House. That may be next fall. It may be next fall. We'll try to get everybody lots of advance warning so you can come to Philadelphia and hang out with us. 10 years. So I want to say hello to all of TAs, introduce a few people who are just joining us, make a few announcements, remind you about how to reach us, and then we'll get going immediately with probably some stuff coming in through the forums or through the comment feed, which I'm already seeing in YouTube, and a couple of introductions to what's going on in the forums, and then we'll just get right to it, to the week one discussion. So I want to say hi. Kate Colby is here. Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm good.
Gabriel Ojeda Segay. Hey, Gabby. How are you?
Hello. I'm
Good to see you in Chicago. Kate is in Providence, Rhode Island. And there is Kanar Gavin. Hello, Kanar. How are you? Somewhere like a southwest Philly, I want to say.
Yeah, I'm technically in Delaware County, actually, so a bit west of Philly.
County. Okay, very cool. And this is Max McKenna, who is actually in Berlin, Germany. Hello, Max.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Allie Castleman, who is either in NY or somewhere in New Jersey. I'm guessing New York.
I'm in New York.
Fantastic. And Lily Applebaum, who's 2.5 floors above us. Hi, Lily.
Hey,
Here at the Writers House. Hello. Erica Kaufman. Hello in the beautiful Hudson Valley.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Amber Rose Johnson, who is in West Philadelphia, not far from where I would be if I were home. Hey, Amber Rose.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Dave Poplar, who I think is in Arizona with all the windows shut and the AC on, I'm guessing. Hey, Dave. And Jake Marmer. Hi. And Jake Marmer, who has moved from Northern to Southern California. Am I correct?
Yes.
Where exactly? Are you in Orange County, maybe?
In Los Angeles.
You're in LA. Wow, cool. Okay. This is great. And there are other TAs who will be joining us this year who aren't able to come today. We also have the privilege of hosting a visitor, and we'll get some visitors this session. But Sophia Naz is here. There's Sophia. They can see you, Sophia. Can you wave? This is Sophia Naz. Sophia associated with ModPo since 2013, a fine poet. I'm just holding up two of the books that Sophia has published. And there's a new book coming out. It's called Open Zero. I have seen, actually we once talked about, we made a recording of a conversation about one of the poems from this book, and it's now called Open Zero. And who is publishing it?
So it's published by Yoda Press from India. Unfortunately, the copies are lost in transit from India, but
like
we
everything.
hope to get them soon.
Well,
yes.
We will let everybody know
Yes.
about that. And as usual, during our conversation, when we get phone calls, Lily, brace yourself, I'll be giving away copies of some books, including a couple of second copies I have of Sophia's books. And so if you call in, I'll give that number in a second. Thanks to Lily, Chris will get a mailing address for people. Talk about lost in transit. We'll get a mailing address for people, and we can send you a copy of these books. It's just a tiny bit of an incentive for you to call in. I just want to point out two new TAs. You've already met them, but I just want to emphasize that Kate Colby, an eminent poet, a good friend of the Writers' House and of all of us, is doing a first stint as a ModPo TA. And it doesn't feel like that, Kate Colby, because you've done so many things with ModPo in the past, but welcome to you. Can we get like snaps and huzzahs? Kate Colby is here. Look at everybody snapping. Even Max is snapping. He's usually too cool for snapping, but he did it this time. And Kanar Gavin is joining us as well, and we're so pleased, Kanar, with your joining us for the first time. Okay, and Lainey Brown. Let me just say that Lainey Brown has joined us. Many of you know that Anna Strong-Safford has left the Writers' House team and has moved to Episcopal Academy, which is actually her alma mater high school, very nice high school in the Philly area, and is teaching high school English, and I'm sure within a year or two will become the chair of that department, and is going to be a TA this session. Is going to be a TA, but not able to make webcasts mostly, but will be joining us for office hours. In any case, as many of you know, most of you, all of you, because I wrote to everybody to announce this with great joy, Lainey Brown has joined us a long time, a teacher here and a friend and a poet who is in the syllabus, in the ModPo Plus syllabus. Lainey Brown, so glad you're here, coordinating ModPo. Thank you. Yay, Lainey.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you so much. All right. So just a couple of clues about how to reach us today, and then a few introductory comments, and we'll get going. The number to call is 610-616-323028. Sorry, Chris. 3208. 3208. How did I get that wrong? I've done that before. 610-616-3208. And if you are Skyping from overseas or you prefer Skype, you're going to use the Skype handle as follows: ModPoPen, ModPoPenn. Twitter is @ModPoPen, and please use the hashtag ModPoLive. ModPoLive. There's the Facebook group with 10,000 plus members, and if you want to post in Facebook, we'll see it. And most of you will be posting to the ModPo YouTube comment feed. That is obviously the easiest thing to do if you're watching us on YouTube. And so I'm going to ask some, and then there's the discussion forum thread inside the ModPo site at Coursera. So I'm going to ask who usually does Twitter. Gabby, could you do Twitter? Are you okay with that? Okay. And the Facebook group, usually Amber Rose does Facebook group. Is that good for you? It's been quieter.
In it to win it.
What's that?
Said I'm already in it to win it.
Okay, great. Typical and characteristic. The Facebook group has been less traffic in recent years. I think ModPo people have outgrown Facebook a little. However, there's a lot going on in the Facebook group, so don't abandon it. The YouTube comment feed, I think it would be great to have two people in there. Lily and Max, would you be willing to look at the? Okay, great. And I would love it if you folks would signal to me that you've got something. I can't see the chat because we're using some weird setup here, so you'll have to actually just sort of wave at me, and we can call you. And the discussion forum thread, Jake, do you have access to the discussion forum thread? If not, that's no problem. I can give it to Dave.
I don't have a keyboard today, but I will remedy that.
Oh. Wait, you'll get a keyboard. How interesting. Okay. Dave Poplar, will you follow the discussion forum thread? There's a couple of things that have been posted there earlier, one of which I'm going to mention, but just in case. Okay? All right, a couple things happening in the forums. There have been tons of introductions, 14 pages, 14 screens of introductions. I recommend that everybody take a look at the introductions. There's so many new people. I urge everybody to go to the study groups and meetups forum. There's been a lot of postings, but not a lot of response. So there are groups trying to form in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in New York. So please take a look. One mention of a forum, a thread in one of the forums, in the ModPo Plus forum. It's the Global Study Group, which now goes by GSG. and they are discussing a poem by Emily Dickinson that we might discuss in this webcast. Much madness is the finest sense. What they've done is they've taken something from ModPo Plus and they have their own discussion. So those of you who've been to ModPo many times, you might want to move over to ModPo Plus. A couple of threads worth mentioning. Jackie Lubeck, who was in Palestine, actually in Gaza for a while, and then has moved to Europe and been back and forth, is back after about 6 or 7 years of not being with us. And Jackie has posted a thread asking why we don't talk about God and religion in relation to Walt Whitman. Janice Orma rightly is taking me to task for something that I said 10 years ago in the Song of Myself video. I used the term omnisexual, a really stupid and crude term to say more about Whitman's gay life and the speaker, the homosexual speaker in that poem. And this was improvised, of course, but I made the stupid phrase, it's not just homosexuality, and that didn't mean by any sense to minimize Whitman's being gay, but to add his sense of loving and caring about everyone. So I used the term omnisexual. So maybe today we'll get a chance to talk about the sexuality of the speaker in Song of Myself, if we get a chance, partly in response to Janice's really good comment. And then Joel McIntyre is annoyed by Dickinson's choice of the word dwelling. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that. We've never really talked about dwelling as a kind of high-toned, off-putting word, but I hope we'll get a chance to do that. Okay, so 610-616-3208. We've got somebody on the line. Chris, do we have somebody on the line?
We do, just 1 minute.
Okay, so I am going to ask Sophia Naz and Lily and Kate to respond to whoever it is on the phone. Meantime, who's got... So, Gabby, is there anything happening in Twitter yet?
Actually, just a lot of hellos from some nears and dears. So we've got a hello from C.A. Knight, from T. Delos Reyes, from Dominic Weston, from Ton, from Artie Maxwell. And we also have our dear friend Jason Zuzka, who is trying to get on our Zoom link. Okay, here he is.
That's great. So Twitter is happening, people. That's great. ModPo, at ModPoPen, or hashtag ModPo Live. So Amber Rose, anything happening in Facebook?
Yeah, a couple folks saying hello. Goli or Gali, I'm not sure about the pronunciation.
G-O-L-Y, I've seen Goli, yes.
Okay, Goli, yes. Was just saying that they are drinking a cup of tea in their this mug and really feeling in the spirit. So yeah, shout out to them.
That is cool. Lily and Max, there's a ton going on. There's Jason. Hello, Jason. There's a ton going on in the chat, the live chat. Do you want to pick out anything, Lily, first?
Sure. I'm loving seeing everyone's hellos. And in particular, Sanjeev sent such a nice welcome message to Lainey. He said, welcome, 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 Lainey Brown in ModPo and now of ModPo. We're so lucky. How is that even possible?
Thank you so much.
That is really cool. That is great. So, and I think Max is also looking at the YouTube feed. Anything significant, Max?
Just lots of familiar folks chiming in saying hello. We have Dan Bergman, Sanjeev, as Lily just mentioned. There's Tan, there's Page Policy. Lots of folks checking in.
That's great. That's cool. I think Chris may be ready. Are you ready to bring someone up? Chris Martin, who is it? Chris is masked, but rings through the mask.
Yes, moving faster here. We have David Herring calling from South England.
Is it Herring?
Yes.
Great. Can you bring Dave up?
You got it.
David, can you hear me? Hello, David. Can you hear me?
Why do I need to do something?
Hello. Can you hear me, David?
I can hear you.
Great. And we can hear you now. Do you prefer Dave or David?
But David.
Fantastic. And where are you exactly?
I live in a place called Corfe Mullen, which is in Dorset in southern England.
Dorset. Great. Is this your first time doing ModPo?
My first call I've made to you, yes.
Your first call. That's great. So
Very
Sophia,
nervous.
yeah, Sophia Naz and Lily and Kate are, no, I was going to say prepped. They're not prepped because they don't know what your question is, but they will take a stab at responding to whatever you want us to talk about. So it's all yours, David. Tell us.
Right, well, I just want to congratulate you guys on an amazing course. I was just getting ready. It's about my third year that I've been following the course materials. And so I was looking at some of your materials on the ModPo Week 1 and on the ModPo Plus. For example, I listened to a great little 10-minute talk on the lull I like, only the lull I like from Walt Whitman. And then the next thing I heard was, or read was a discussion on Dickinsonian dashes.
Ah, the dashes.
And so in my mind, I sort of put those two together, and I wanted to share that thought with you, because I know there's a kind of dichotomy that you present between Whitman and Dickinson. Whitman being very expansive, expanding, a bit like a big bang of a poet, and Dickinson rather the opposite, concise, the big crunch, almost reaching to the vanishing point of poetry. And whereas I think Whitman might take 2 or 3 pages to describe and elaborate on the lull I like. He still likes that little lull, where Dickinson has it on every poem, every page, where she puts a dash.
Yeah.
And I think the Dickinsonian dash is her saying the lull I like in her poem.
David Herring, that is like the perfect first question of the whole season. That is so great. Thank you for the question. And what I'm going to ask you to do is hang up the phone and then listen to the answer on the YouTube stream so that others can call. And thank you for calling. We're going to respond to you.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So the number is 610-626-3208. Chris is standing by for your next call. So let's do it, Lily, Kate, and Sophia in that order. Really, this is an invitation to talk about the old distinction that we created, which is a heuristic or pedagogical distinction that we're not as interested in as we were 10 years ago, I think, although it's still interesting as a teaching method, teaching device. So take it anywhere you like, Lily, first.
Sure. I just pulled the text up, and if anyone's following the canto that David was referring to, is Canto 5, and the line is, only the lull I like, the hum of your valved, or I guess valved voice. So it's really interesting to think about that invitation to, it's part of where he's saying loaf with me on the grass, and the invitation to, or almost demand for another person to join so closely. And we often talk about the dashes as a way to keep people out, or almost like legislate the grammar of the poem. So I like this recontextualizing of the dashes as kind of, I don't want to diminish them by saying background noise, but as like something going on almost in a landscape way in the background, the way that the person's voice becomes part of the landscape as they're loafing on the grass.
That's great. Thank you, Lily. Let's turn to Kate for a quick comment on what David has presented to us. Kate?
I love thinking about the lull as a break that both or either poet needs or need from the intensity of the work they're doing. Dickinson is working with extreme distillation, and Whitman's working with extreme inclusion, and both are tactics for filling the space between the mind and the world, but the need for breaks that indicate the gaps in their abilities is a great point.
Thank you, Kate. Before we turn to Sophia, I just want to lob one at Lainey. Lainey, when I think of the dash, I think of a visuality, something that's scrawled or written in whatever she was using, pencil or some kind of pen, ink. And I think of lull as part of Whitman's passion for the sonorous passion for the sound, even that word lull, right? So am I off in thinking about this distinction between a very visual poet and a poet of ear and orality?
Well, I think the musicality is just different, right? It's not that one is more than the other, but just kind of to add on what everybody said so far, I'm thinking about how the lull is a way that the reader can enter the spaciousness and the loquaciousness of Whitman. Yeah. And the dash is also a way that there's something unsaid or implied. So it also creates a space for the reader, but in a very different way versus, emptiness, silence, what's evoked versus going on and then the expansiveness.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Sophia Nas, the last take at this question, and then we have another caller coming.
Yeah, basically would like to agree with what Lainey said. Dickinson is the master of the implicit. It's a beautiful condensation, and I think the dashes are a kind of springboard onto which you can project virtually anything, So in that sense, I've grown more and more to like Dickinson. I started out being a Whitman fan back in 2013, but I've grown to appreciate this. It's different, but it draws you in. The dashes are actually absolutely key to her aesthetic of just. It's a springboard. Yeah, you can jump off of it wherever you want to.
Yeah. And your own poetry, which I've read a lot of, it tends more recently toward that kind of implication.
It's definitely
and there's a lot of dashes and condensations of words, so you're kind of a Dickinsonian poet.
I've shifted.
Yeah, you really have. Yay, ModPo. Okay, we have another caller, and I'm going to ask Gabby Knar and Amber Rose to respond to whatever this caller wants. And this is partly by way of proving to everyone that we really don't know what we're doing in advance. We really are not a DOA, dead on arrival MOOC like so many, even though the videos, many of them are old. We're new. We're live. We're grayer than we were. Some of us anyway, Dave and I, and we're really like here to respond to you in the moment. We want to prove that the massive open online course, the free non-credit course, is not impersonal, that we are really here listening to you. So who do we have, Chris?
And I just want to quick say we are getting a lot of people calling, so
nice.
I can only take one at a time.
Well, what's wrong with you guys? Can't we set up 3 lines?
I'm working on a call center kind of setup soon.
All right.
But, right now, I can only take one at a time.
Okay.
So if you've tried calling and I haven't been able to answer,
this next caller, whoever it is going to get a copy of the aforementioned Sophia Nas's poems, Date Palms. A copy that will. Let's remember, Chris, to get a mailing address. And Lily, thank you in advance for mailing this out. Okay, who do we have?
Well, it's going to be a long-distance shipment because we have our friend Tan on the line.
This book is going to Siberia.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
It's almost a metaphor for something that will never arrive. Forgive me, Tan. But here in the United States, when somebody says Siberia, I should stop talking about this because this is a ridiculous cliche. Tan, hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay, thank you. How have you been?
Have you started to teach yet again?
I mean, I haven't stopped.
You haven't stopped, right.
It's just a never-stopping madhouse of teaching and more teaching and maybe like one vacation a year.
Yeah. I remember one
I have
vacation.
Some exciting news to share before I have my question, I guess, or a thought. I am actually potentially moving to the Czech Republic very soon. And by very soon, I mean like in the beginning of October, if everything goes well and I get the visa.
Wait, did you say you're moving?
I will probably have to kind of hold off by the shipping address because I don't know where I will be by the time
All right,
it
so
arrives, which is very exciting and cool, but also like...
We'll mail this to you later then. That's the plan. Did you just say that you're moving to Prague or visiting Prague?
moving.
Wow.
I am a student now of a master's program in gender studies, so I will be a gender scholar, I guess, if that is what it makes me. And I will be studying for 2 years and hopefully actually stick around there for much, much longer.
Wow.
If everything goes my way, which, you know, fingers crossed.
That's really cool. You know, the chances are increasing that we will meet in person because the ModPo team is hoping to do some traveling one of these days, and Europe is certainly on our list. And maybe, you know, you can scoot up from Prague to Berlin and hang out with us there, right, Max? Or possibly come to the U.S. and hang out with us here at the Writers' House. And Lily is excited about that, among others. So, Ton, do you have a comment or a question for us?
Yes, I do. It actually also relates to the dichotomy, or kind of almost like a forced maybe dichotomy between Dickinson and Whitman. Because, you know, I was kind of revising before the webcast today and was, reading Dickinson. And I caught myself thinking that maybe Dickinson and Whitman are not as different as we think they are in terms of what their writing does. But the difference is that they do have, I started actually seeing differently, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is I was, reading Dickinson and listening to the discussion while, sitting in my beautiful room, eating freshly washed, grapes. And I leave the house maybe once a day. And I'm very selective about who visits me and everything. And I was like, wow, she actually does also luxuriate in the language. Her words sound tasty and beautiful and kind of juicy almost, but in a different way from Whitman. And as a deaf person, like, sound is important to me. And then I started thinking about something that you said, which was that, and not just you, but it is a recurring theme in week one, that Dickinson's writing and Dickinson's poetry is not as democratic as Whitman. And I'm kind of shifting to disagreeing with that, actually, and challenging it.
Great.
What I mean here is Dickinson is definitely selective, but even in the writing at Dwell on Possibility, she still writes in the visitor. The visitor is there.
Yeah.
And not even implied, it is there in the writing. And so it almost is like implied, as if she has visitors pretty regularly. And yes, the visitors are selected, but as a woman, it probably is a matter of like safety. My mother checks the lock on the door 55 times because we come from the 90s, and in the 90s people were killed if you didn't do that. While Whitman reminds me as a combination of a drunk girl in a bar and my own father, because it's like I love everyone because I assume that everyone is like me and I don't care how much space I actually give them.
Wow. Ton.
And his writing is big. His writing is beautiful. It's also, I don't know, I have like an image of like a burger when you're drunk. Like great. But how much is there for you, you know?
Yeah.
It's like I am open to everyone. So to whom are you actually open?
Wow.
And so I tend to now think that maybe Dickinson is actually more democratic in her writing, because she at least tells you, if you are creative, if you like, I don't know, do fun things with your brain and indulge in creativity, then, you know, we can be friends. And with Whitman, it's just like everybody can be friends with him. Does it make sense?
Ton, I love that question. I think everybody, I'm looking
Hello?
at the Zoom group, everybody
Can
loves
you hear
that.
me?
Ton. So what we're going to do is ask
Wow.
you to hang up and listen to the responses that you get.
I think I lost you.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
well, we're still hearing you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Gabby, Knar,
Hello.
Amber Rose.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Chris, do you want to
Okay, cool.
talk? Okay, good. Ton, would you hang up, and we're going to give you responses to your fabulous erosion of the old binarism that we set up in this course. So thank you for calling.
Thank you very much. Okay. I was very afraid that I just cut off and you didn't hear anything I said.
We heard everything you said, and it's fabulous.
But
thank you.
It worked out.
Okay.
It worked out.
Safe traveling.
Okay.
Be in touch with us when you get to Prague. Okay.
Obviously.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. All right. Thank you. That's Tan. Wow. We have so much to reply, but I'm going to ask everybody to speak briefly to these issues. Gabby, Kanar, Amber Rose, and then I'm adding Erica to that. So 4 of you. Quick responses to any aspect of this. I have a feeling a lot of people who are watching this webcast are going to be really interested because this questions one of the basic premises of week 1, which is a silly premise, but a premise that causes discussion. Gabby first, then Kanar.
Yeah. I mean, the distinction is useful pedagogically, but the thing that Dickinson and Whitman both share at this moment that we're really interested in is that they stage the idea that poetry is a form of access to the world, a way of getting into it, a way of kind of interfacing with it. So both, I think, would agree with the Whitmanian line of like, in Canto 2, have you reckoned 1,000 acres much? Have you reckoned the earth much? Have you practiced so long to learn to read? Have you felt so proud to get at the meaning of poems? That equivalency between like getting into the land, getting into the poem. I think both of them actually totally work with that. The distinction that I see that is like most saleable is that one, Whitman sees that mission as being kind of equivalent to building a really big blank verse project that doesn't have so much of an internal architecture. It's more expansive, it's more written out, it follows its own sort of logic to end results as often as it can. Whereas the Dickinson, I feel, is more about internal architectures. It's more about like micro movements between parts. It's more about structured pieces. And so what we have is 2 people who are realizing the same sort of like aesthetic goal in 2 very different ways. And that I think is what ends up so appealing about the distinction to me.
That was great. My gosh. I hope someone's transcribing all this. Thank you, Gabby. We're going to go to Kanar. You want to add something, Kanar?
Yeah, absolutely. So for some reason, Dickinson's kind of invocation of the athletic when he's talking about democracy was kind of on my mind in trying to parse this distinction a little bit more. And just kind of thinking about the sort of able, kind of agile, mobile figure that we get in Dickinson, in Whitman. But you know, that kind of agility, I think also maybe accomplishes a certain kind of flattening or leveling where, you know, potential footholds are lost. And thinking with the footholds still, in Dickinson, we actually have, in fact, so many footholds, whether it be the dash or a line break, these kinds of moments of anchorage that then do, I think, open into this really broad spectrum of perhaps we might say more democratic possibility. And in part because they're so frequent, those kinds of notes of kind of landing that you have with Dickinson. So yeah, that's my thought.
That's really great. And implicit in what you've just said is something that Gabby started us on, which is accessibility. If we think about many definitions of accessibility, it turns out that Dickinson is very accessible because of all these ways in. That's very cool. Thank you. Amber Rose and then Erica. Amber Rose, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a brief thought that I came to mind when Gabby was talking about both of them being interested in poetry as a way of interacting with or accessing the world. It's weird that there's like a doubling of my image. It's distracting me.
Oh, you look fine to us.
Sorry. Yeah, okay, so the word that I want to put out is relation, because it's a word that I am often thinking with. And I think both of these writers are trying to get at sort of the nitty gritty, really the poetics, like how they are in relation to others. And for Whitman, that's maybe much more forward, but I think Dickinson is doing the same thing, but is taking a different route. Dickinson is kind of thinking about her condition, her living condition, her thinking condition, her writing conditions, right? And how that weighs against the world's binaries. And each and every time she's refusing. I know that there's this binary between me and the world. I know that there's this binary between me and you. I know that there's this binary between right and wrong or sense and nonsense or whatever. And she's always trying to like blur that line. And I think Whitman is also trying to get us to think about kind of the murkiness of relation in this place where we overlap and are kind of porous and filtering in and out of each other. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot that they're speaking to.
Nice. Thank you, Amber Rosa. We're kind of getting to what we hoped week one of ModPo would get people to, which is to see them both as radical poets, radical in the sense that they're so different from the poets of their time. Radical poets using different means to get at something of the same, which is a definition of poetry as challenging every convention you could possibly think of, including the way we think about poetry itself. So there's that, and I think several of you have said that. Erica Kaufman, one last take on this fabulous riff of Tan's. Nobody talked about who was it? Somebody in a bar. There was a hamburger in there. It was amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Tan. I really enjoyed your comment. I think my contribution will be to kind of underscore things that I heard Amber Rose and Gabby saying about Whitman's externalness and Dickinson's internalness. And the thing I'm thinking about is how this relationality happens within the way the poems are built. Like in Dickinson, in the previous question, we're thinking about how much can happen in a single dash. And in Whitman, I think the same could be said of the punctuation. So these are the moments where the reader is forging or figuring out what the relationships are and confronting the way that the poems ask us to rethink relationships.
Thank you so much, Erica, and all of you. And thanks to Tan again. And Tan, I know that you'll be in touch with us when you have an address in Prague, and we'll send you a copy of Sophia's book. The next caller is coming in, and before we turn to the next caller, I want to say two things. One is that the next caller will get a copy of Jeremy Dixon's book, which we hawked and ballyhooed a couple of years ago, but I have another copy. It's a very good book. So there's that. And I also want to say that even though we're getting so many phone calls, which I hope we will get all 10 weeks, we are all looking at the fabulous live chat and the tweets, and there's just so much going on, and we read you, we hear you, we will follow up. We'll take a moment after this call to review some of the great things that are being said. So we haven't forgotten about you. We're just happy that so many people are tuning in today. Okay, Chris, who do we have on the phone?
The next caller is actually calling from tomorrow because it's after midnight.
Wait, I'm going to guess.
You're going to take a guess?
Okay. Is it Bonita Cape in New Zealand?
No.
Okay. Somebody in Australia?
No.
Japan?
Getting closer, I think.
I can't do it. Who is it?
We have T.
T from the Philippines.
Yes.
T is calling. It is tomorrow. Hi, T.
Hello from tomorrow.
Oh, my God. T, we love you so much. You are so connected to us, even though we've never met you and you're far away and in tomorrow.
I know. How many years has it been? And we haven't filmed.
Well, we got to get it together. I mean, this world is not that big. We need to get it together. T, are you doing okay? We're the ones getting all the storms. Have you gotten some of the storms?
We are actually in the middle of a typhoon right now.
God, every time you call, there's a typhoon. Not to. Oh my goodness! Is this typhoon have a name?
It's because it's typhoon season. Every time it's month.
Oh my gosh! Are you safe and okay?
Yeah, I'm safe. I'm okay.
Okay, great.
I'm doing good. Are you guys okay? Are you?
Yeah,
doing
we had
well
some.
Safe?
We had some weird flooding.
Taking care of yourselves.
Sophia Naz is making noises about moving to the east from the west of fires and earthquakes. Right, both those are the two main problems with you're in the peninsula above San Francisco, which gets all the worst stuff. And Sophia is thinking about moving east. But I have to say, the other day we were totally flooded out here. Maybe you should think about going somewhere else.
I have to find a mountain.
Find a mountain. That's right. So, T, what do you want to say to us? Oh, by the way, the respondents to whatever T has to say, and this is going to be lightning round, so everybody do it quickly, will be Jason, Max, Allie, Lily, Jake, and Dave. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. So whatever T says, I'm sure there'll be a lot to say. So T, take it away. What do you want to talk to us about?
Well, I am very curious for those who identified as Whitmanians versus Dickinsonians, how this whole pandemic and how staying inside has either changed or your perspective or further amplified how you feel about these poets. For example, for myself, I have been isolating for almost 2 years now by myself.
By yourself?
And I've always, yeah. We've never left the lockdown since March 2020. It's never, never been lifted. So,
oh boy,
I have been in isolation for almost 2 years now. And the more I read Dickinson, I appreciate how she delves into the interior self. But also, since I have been forced to stay inside, there's a part of me that appreciates more what Whitman writes in his poetry. So I was wondering if that's the case for other people as well, how they appreciate these two poets now in the kind of environment that we are living in now.
Wow, what a great question, T. Thank you for that. And you know, the obvious answer is to talk about Dickinson, who, you know, practiced a lot of interesting isolation and has so many things to say about it. But I bet the ModPo TA crew is going to say things that one wouldn't expect. So T truly didn't just toss off that "we love you" phrase. We do. Yeah, everybody putting
I love
hands by hearts. There's a lot of hands by hearts. T, take care of yourself. I'm going to ask you to hang up and listen to the responses, but we know that you will be in touch throughout these 10 weeks and beyond. So be safe, okay?
All right. Be safe too, everyone.
Okay. All right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
T. All right. So we're going to go Jason, Max, Allie, Lily, Jake, Dave. Quick responses to T. There's so many ways this can go. Hello, Jason. We didn't get to say hi to you. How are you doing? I think you're muted.
Unmuted. I'm great. It's great to be back.
It's good to see you
here with everyone else.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear T, who I still have things she sent way back when, and I think it's really smart to think about, because we kind of in our close readings take the poems a little bit outside of time, or we think about the author's context, not so much ours.
Right.
But of course, that's
good point.
Belied by W's for Walt Whitman's soul. But to think about the conditions of the pandemic, which are such unique conditions and which would not be remotely the same conditions without, like what we're doing now, without technology and media for at least some people in the world.
Right.
But I think that directly to T's question about has one's response changed, I think there's a longing for the kind of noisy, just being in the blab of the pave, and in that little crowd scene, I felt exhilarated to just be in the middle of the bustle of a city. But I really felt also just our bedrock poem of I dwell in possibility. I think that that's kind of an iconic poem for the pandemic, and that the more, I guess, I was studying our three main Dickinson poems, I felt like I was becoming tiny, like a piece of dust, and getting fluttered all around the place as I tried to find a place to land. And so, I mean, I feel like at least like those three poems specifically, with their conceits and with their grammar, I felt like are structured like Escher drawings or Mobius strips. There's like, we talk about whether Dickinson is exclusionary, if her house is exclusionary, but we have to remember that the house is just a conceit. It's not, she's not talking about her real house. And so that house kind of folds away from itself but folds you into it. So it's also picturing like origami or language, the thisness of language coming forward to kind of kaleidoscopically tumble the reader into a place of meditation and possibility. So it felt really enriched my yesterday and today.
Yeah, and tomorrow too, because T asked the question. Thank you, Jason. That was brilliant as usual. I mean, it makes me think that maybe one way to meditate yourself out of the room that you're in quarantine is to just think of it all as a conceit. I'm not sure that would work, but it's worth a try. All right, we're going to go quickly to Max, Allie, Lily, Jake, and Dave. This is such a good thing to respond to and so relevant to our moment. So, Max?
I really like the kind of reflection that T's question means to prompt, in part, well, for two reasons. One being that we're doing ModPo here for the second time in the pandemic with two particularly significant tranches of time to deal with and to think through. One being that it's been like 18 months since the pandemic started, so I think we've all gone several times on that sort of emotional roller coaster, and the other being that it's been 10 years of ModPo, so obviously our readings of these poems have changed, come and gone with each year, or every 5 years, or now, perhaps they've just changed gradually over the course of a decade. And I think that, the sort of time scale that we're dealing with is also perhaps why we were talking a little bit earlier about the arbitrary distinction that is proposed in week one between Whitman and Dickinson, and how that seems actually very much to be in flux, because I would say that's probably our experience of reading both of these poets at this point in the course, and also at this point in the pandemic. So it seems to me that T is asking something along the lines of like, okay, so after being forced inside for a certain amount of time, did you crave a poetics of indoorsness or outdoorsness? And now, that for some parts of the world, for some people, being able to go back outdoors more or differently, I mean, is that creating a sort of a different reaction, kind of blowback? Do you want more indoorsness now? Have you become really attached to a sort of Dickinsonian interior existence? And I think it's all of those things. And I think that's also, so I think, we can kind of use our own changing attitudes towards these poets to perhaps probe further that distinction between Whitman and Dickinson. To be like, okay, well, sometimes I want Whitman, sometimes I want Dickinson, and sometimes it has to do with how I think I'm feeling on a given day, and sometimes it has to do with what the crazy socio-political circumstances we live in are forcing us to do.
Mm-hmm. And today, Max, where are you, in the room or out on the landscape or in the city?
I'm outside. I'm currently indoors, but I like to leave a window cracked.
All right, good. Thank you, Max. We're going to turn to Allie and then Lily. Allie Castleman, hello.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I think kind of off of what Max was saying, it's our great luck that we don't ultimately have to choose. But I'm kind of stuck on both what Jason was saying about like dissolving the house, and kind of what Tan was saying about who is actually more democratic. And I guess I'm not thinking about it in terms of as much in terms of like access or democracy, but it does occur to me that if you get rid of Dickinson's house, what's left is this relationship between a poet who isn't pretending to be anything other than herself and the reader. And that relationship between poet and reader is absolutely central. Whereas with Whitman, we get this more kind of idealized sense of relationship to everything, and I am everything.
Yeah.
And I think especially if you've been in a condition where you've been isolated for a very extended amount of time, there's an unrealness to the Whitmanian part of that. And it's actually, you can be, if someone is claiming to see everything and everyone, then the reader can't actually be seen, because it takes an amount of selection to be seen in terms of real relationship, real like one-to-one, human-to-human relationship. So I think in that way, I'm not sure if that like really, if I express what I'm like trying to say.
Oh my God, you did.
I think in that way, Dickinson has felt really appropriate to just that craving of like, I want another person in my mind, as opposed to like, I want to enter onto this like expansiveness of just like everything, and this this claim that like there is no frame.
You people are amazing. Allie Castleman, you're amazing. You're just among the amazing people. Holy cow, Lainey. The things that have been said. I mean, I'm stunned, Allie. One of the things that you said was that, you know, we think of the original Dickinsonian room as the unreal space, and the real space was getting out there and, you know, taking your chances on the road and you know, mixing it up with the people on the street and all that stuff. We think of that as the real. And if after a while the room is real, your reality, then that whole distinction between what's real in a poem and what's unreal doesn't make any sense anymore. It was all about some kind of convention that we set up, that fresh air and being outside and mixing with people and being close to people was reality. Holy Toledo. Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. Lily, Jake, and Dave, quickly on this question. And then I'm going to ask some of you folks who've been following the comment streams to sort of report on those. So let's go to Lily first, and then Jake.
Earlier in our conversation, Amber Rose made this really wonderful point about Dickinson's relationship to binaries and trying to elide or confuse or just make binaries more complicated, and basically can't think of a stronger binary than like quarantining in your house, like inside safe, outside not safe, right? And it was actually a YouTube user named Marianne who connected that with Volcanoes Be in Sicily, where Dickinson says, I judge from my geography. And so I guess I don't know that this is like a point to take comfort in, but just something to think about, like the my geography aspect of that is just because your life is continuing indoors doesn't mean that there aren't ways that you're pushing against those binaries or pushing against binaristic thinking or doing exciting, interesting geographical exploration from indoors. I really liked that sticking with the my geography and thinking about how that relates to being quarantined inside.
That's great. Highly recommend Volcanoes Be in Sicily. It's in ModPo Plus, and there's a good video that's associated with it. I mean, think about reversing the whole question of safety indoors. It's volcano. What is it? What's the last line? Vesuvius at home. Holy shit. Okay, Jake, and then Dave.
Hey, yeah, great question there. So I guess my conditions of the pandemic have been such that a lot more has to happen in shorter snatches of time, in part because, so much got reorganized and, my children are home so much. So the blab of the pave is real and in a very different kind of a way.
You're accusing your children of blabbing?
Yeah, I mean, I relish it a lot of the time, but then other time it's, Whitmanian is one way of calling it. So, looking for snatches of time and shorter, kind of more condensed work that can kind of like sit inside and gradually unfold over time and can be carried with and you can kind of just hold on to longer and let it linger. So for me, that mode has made more sense in the past while. And something else that's happening is I think just more intense mode of self-scrutiny that's constantly occurring. Like I don't know about other TAs, but right now, like I'm speaking and I'm seeing myself like in two places at the same time. It's really like. It's like Dostoevsky and double, like to like which one is worse, So I think that kind of self scrutiny and inwardness is definitely taking me in the Dickinsonian direction.
I just want to toss out a concept of time in poetry thing, and then we'll turn to Dave, and then I want to ask people to get stuff from the threads, and I'm going to ask a couple of you to respond to those. But my thought is that poetry is an art, not the only one, but it is an art that can mess around with time. So that if you're reading a poem that is a serial poem or a digressive poem, I'm thinking of The Skaters by Ashbery or something like that, where it just goes skating along, and you forget the time register doesn't make any sense. I mean, the same, of course, in music, particularly experimental music or modern music, where things can get extended, where, my favorite things can be 9 minutes, it can be 27 minutes, the Coltrane, it can be 36 minutes, and when you're in it, the time doesn't really matter as much, and poetry is one of those things. And maybe since time has been changing for us during this pandemic, maybe music and poetry are more rather than less relevant to the way we mark our days. That would be a freaky concept. So let's go to Dave. Dave Poplar, hello, pal.
How's it going?
Good.
So this has made me think about agency and control, just these two different approaches to poetry, and in light of the pandemic, because Dickinson, it can be sort of characterized or stereotyped as somebody who's living inside their own head, which is something that I know I certainly had a tendency to do in general, but especially to an intense degree during the pandemic, where the entire world exists in your head and you can go deep in it and examine it, but everything is in your control. Even what you choose to respond to, all of that is in your control. And the thing about the real world, which when you're living inside your head, it becomes sort of abstract and distant. But when you're in the real world, it's out of your control. So much of it is out of your control. And that seems to be, in many ways, what Whitman is showing us, how it's out of your control. And it's interesting because when you're in that environment, when things are just completely out of your control, you're forced to express your own agency, but in a different way. Maybe it's like a difference between riding a stationary bike and then going out and riding a road bike on your own. They're just different types of control, expressions of agency going on in both of these poets together. And this experience of the pandemic, which has made me realized how much I need to be out in the chaotic real world environment. It's just made me think about
craving spaces where you can't control things, as opposed to the usual common sense thing, which is to try to get in spaces where you can. I love that. Thank you, Dave. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask some folks to read a few samples of things that have been on Twitter and Facebook and so forth. And then I would like for Sophia Nas, Lainey Brown, Kate Colby, and Gabby to respond to any one of the things that you hear, lightning round quick, just something that you hear that you want to respond to. And then we're going to take, there's been a caller waiting, we're going to take a last call, then we're going to talk about a Dickinson poem, just all together very quickly, and then we'll do final words. Okay, so first we have, and so Sophia, Lainey, Kate, and Gabby, you need to listen carefully to what's being said here. Okay, well, let's go to Amber Rose for some things from Facebook, if there are any.
No, not too much in the Facebook right now. There was a comment from Sharon who was talking about Tan's question and feeling connected in very different pandemic responses. The end of their comment says, the circumstances of pandemic made me feel so close to her experience, talking about a poem that she read by Natasha Trethewey. And Sharon says, I think of Dickinson and Whitman as both watchers of others, and reflecting on this period of the pandemic, that experience of watching seems really central.
That is very cool. Is that Sharon Wells?
No, not Sharon Wells, Sharon Sibler.
Cool. Thanks, Sharon. Okay, so let's go to Gabby for anything on Twitter that's worth noting.
Yeah, well, there is a bit of complimenting of Jeremy Dixon, including by Jeremy Dixon. It's always good. But also, I like this. T was responding to the recent thoughts about her own question. And one thing that she wrote that I think is really interesting is just an extra question, which is like, what is my relationship to physical space vis-a-vis the white space of the page? So, I mean, one of the sufferings that our ModPo takes on is that we read things not on like physical pages, but we usually read them as they're on the Poetry Foundation website or something like that. So we have a little bit less of the visual relationship, but I think that visual question is a good one.
Great, thank you. Lily and Max, what do we have from the YouTube comment feed? I've been watching it, it's huge. Lily first.
Well, I have two shout outs I think I want to give. First, Dennis Aguinaldo is also in the Philippines.
Dennis, yes, of course, an original ModPoer.
I checked in with him on the stream. He said he's safe and cozy with ModPo through cyclone season, which is good. So shout out to Dennis. But mainly I just wanted to read a beautiful comment that Dan Bergman typed in. So I'm just going to read that. He says, Dickinson and Whitman were radical voices pitched under and over the radar of their time. So we are still getting the signals.
Nice. Dan Bergman, superstar, a CTA, ModPo, a BA from Harvard University. We're all so happy that Dan is with us, continues to be with us in ModPo. Max, you want to add a thing or two from the comment feed in YouTube?
I was also going to, thanks Lily, I was also going to pull out Dan's comment there because it is quite lovely. And because the metaphors in what he's written there are full of like really enticing, almost like cosmic valences about voices from the past into the future being detected by radars. I think there's a lot to work with there. I can pull out another comment, though. And this one is from Natalia J, agreeing with me from my comment earlier. I think the duality that both Whitman and Dickinson represent is a duality present in all of us, especially at this time. And Sanjeev added to that, indeed, for extroverts, perhaps there's a forced duality of having to become introverts the last 18 months. Interacting via screens, talking through masks, no parties, no loafing.
No loafing, yeah. Wow. Or too much. I'm not sure which. That's great. Okay, thank you. Dave Poplar, is there anything significant that you'd like to pass along from the discussion forum thread?
Sure. Anna popped in to say hi, and she can't wait to watch
our
the recording.
Anna on break at school?
Our Anna said she can't wait to watch the recording later today. So,
nice.
Shout out to her. And there's also a question by Lydia Ostapiv, who asks, does Dickinson's sense of irony present obstacles to reading her poems?
Nice. That's great. Oh, we have so many people doing so many interesting things. So Sophia, Lainey, Kate, and Gabby, quick responses to anything that you just heard. Anything at all, quick. Sophia, what caught your attention?
Well, just what caught my attention was that when it just occurred to me that when the physical world recedes or becomes at a distance, then I think it is the poem, the language that's what it comes to the fore, and it for me anyway, it has an outsized influence on my life, and it acquires the room of the poem. It acquires a greater physicality, so to speak, because that's where I am, to Dickinsonian sense, dwelling all the time. It's in the room of the poem. It's in the head, in my head, which is where the room is. The room is your head.
Yeah.
And so I really came to appreciate Dickinson in this time of the pandemic. The spatial architecture is so concise, and it's precise, and there is not a single. She doesn't waste any line, any space, and I think that for me, that's just what stood out. And I became much more attracted to Dickinson in the pandemic.
Marvelous.
For me.
Thank you so much. Lainey, a quick thought in response to the ModPo people around the world making their comments?
Yes. I just want to echo T's question that was just brought up. What is my relation to physical space and white space on the page? And so I was thinking about all these questions of in the room and dissolving the room. And it seems to me that in both poets, there's the possibility that where we are is not only the physical location of where we are. So not only dissolving the room, but we're still exactly where we were, but dissolving constrictive notions of time, which I think relates to what you were saying about time and what happens when we enter the time in the poem in experiencing art. And that's this sense of now.
Yeah.
Which is so helpful.
Which is why we love, in ModPo, most of us love the metapoem, because the metapoem allows you to stay in there for a while and think about the poem as commenting on itself. And that lostness that you feel in a metapoem is an incredible relief in a way. Thank you, Lainey. Kate, any response to anything we heard from the various threads and forums?
Well, I am also still thinking about poetry in the pandemic time, which the first comment addressed in a more general way. And I can also respond to this partly as a writer. I think of poetry as a form of resistance to consensual reality, because language is the locus and the medium of so much of that consensus. And during this time when we've, been deprived of other people and the material world, it feels instinctively like maybe we've been denied some of that conversation and consensus. But in fact, it turned out that because of media and social media and online journalism, we've all been bombarded with language and these various micro consensus in a much more intense way during this time. So I have found it more difficult to write poetry during this time, and that's a whole other conversation or topic, but I find that maybe counterintuitively, poetry has become that much more important and vital to me during this time of isolation, because the internet has just become a place to resist in poetry, I think.
What you said is similar to what's been said in so many of the introductions in the thread where people are introducing themselves about why they found ModPo, why they need ModPo, why they're returning to ModPo. So that difference between all the language that's ambient around us, that's bombarding us, and a poem is made more manifest. And so why not go for it? Remind yourself what that difference is. Okay, and Gabby, a quick response to anything you heard from the various forums?
Yeah, I want to respond hopefully simultaneously to T's follow-up about the page and actually an earlier discussion post thing about Whitman and sexuality. And I guess what I want to say is there's a line in the What is the Grass section of Song of Myself where one of Whitman's guesses at what the grass might be is a uniform hieroglyphic, meaning something that encodes meaning, but that is the same constantly. So it's whatever the meaning is, it is iterated again and again across a field. And first of all, I think that that's one way that Whitman's Song of Myself relates to its page space. It wants to sort of populate, it wants to iterate itself, it wants to sort of do its thing, which is partly why it's so long, but partly why so much of it is about kind of reveling in its iteration. The other thing I want to say is that if there's something gay about Whitman's writing, it's perhaps that sort of transformation of sameness into a love of everything. Because that's what that uniform hieroglyphic is meant to be. He says, because it's a uniform hieroglyphic, it's everywhere.
That's such a coherent response to Janice's concern expressed in the forum, so thank you for that. Okay, so the person on the phone has been waiting a long time. This is going to be our last call. I'm going to ask Allie, Jake, Dave, and Kanar to answer briefly whatever question is posed. Okay, so who do we have on the phone?
Well, unfortunately, the caller is not on the line any longer. We seem to lose Laura, who was calling from Maine.
But I'm sorry.
I didn't get her exact question, but she signed up for ModPo last year and did some bits and pieces, but is following through this year, 2021, to try to do the full syllabus. So
good, great. Thank you, Laura. Well, I'm going to say the phone number again. If we get a quick call, we'll do it. But otherwise, I have something else I want us to do before final words. The number is 610-616-3208, 610-616-3208. If you're calling from out of the country, you may prefer Skype, and our handle is ModPo Pen. Pen is with two N's. So I'm going to read the Dickinson poem, Much Madness is Divinest Sense, and I'm going to ask the aforementioned Allie, Jake, Dave, and Kanar to just respond to anything, a micro comment in response to this amazing poem. Okay? So, and ModPo TAs have a copy because I sent this out earlier, but even if you don't, you can hear it. And ModPo people who are watching this webcast can either hear it and try to follow along, or can go to ModPo Plus to find it, or you can go to the Poetry Foundation website and find it, Much Madness. Here it is. Much madness is divinest sense to a discerning eye. Much sense, the starkest madness. 'Tis the majority in this, as all prevail. Assent, and you are sane. Demur, you're straightway dangerous and handled with a chain. That is chilling at the end, and handled with a chain. My goodness. Okay, so Allie, Jake, Dave, Kanar, quick thoughts about this Dickinson poem. Allie first.
Amazing. I am new to this poem, and one thing that strikes me is that in the flip, that she's kind of almost like seesawing between sense and madness. I feel like there's a direct line to tell all the truth and tell it slant.
Yes.
And so that's just something I'm thinking about.
I love that. That's great. It's a great pair for that poem. Jake, quick thought on this?
So, Al, you mentioned there is a strand on ModPo Plus forums and a discussion of this poem, which is really, really good, and I would encourage everybody to take a
And
look.
the video that goes with it, Jake, where's that video from?
The video that we made in the car.
We were in a car, in a rental car in San Francisco, and we did a 5 or 6 minute discussion of this poem in the back seat of the car with Anna.
That's much madness, especially
that is much
given that.
With Zach, who was filming it. I hope he wasn't driving, but he filmed it, from the front seat.
I think there was a division of labor there with Chris and Zach driving. I don't know who was. Yeah, it was all a blur of the peninsula and the discussion. Yes, but on the forums there is a question from Riham, an excellent question about the word divinist. Like, what's the difference between divinist and like just run-of-the-mill plain divine? And I think that's worth pondering there. And one way to look at it is maybe like divinist. We're talking about like almost like mystical kind of divinist, not merely religious.
I love it.
Not merely observant, but the madness, what may seem like madness, like that's divinist, and poets' version of the mystical. That's much madness. And other ways, maybe just in Dickinsonian vision, like to call something divine and other things not, like that wouldn't work. There's divine and then there's divinist.
Oh my God, this is for many of us, including Jake, the high holies, and I just want everybody to know who cares about holiness that he used the phrase run-of-the-mill, plain, divine. I also say there's a pun in there, divinist with discerning. So divining something is to get to the bottom of it, right? So divinist, wow, this is complicated stuff. Thank you, Jake. Dave Poplar and then Kanar quickly in response to this Dickinson poem. Dave, your thought?
Love the line, "Assent and you are sane." And it reminds me of something that Kate just said that was so cool, I had to write it down. She referred to poetry as resistance to consensual reality. And I think that sums it up so beautifully. And this poem sums that up so perfectly.
Yay, Dave Poplar and Kate. That was fantastic. Gosh, I'm learning a lot. Kanar, last thought on this poem before we're going to take a quick call from somebody.
Yeah, I was actually right in there with Kate and David, kind of thinking about how poetry does not follow the logic of common sense, including sort of how one might or might not want to consent to a particular reality. But that brought me to madness, which I think in this poem is operating in a lot of ways as this kind of uncommon sense. And, maybe we can think there too about the poet's imperative to sort of demur, right? To refuse to sort of not fall into subjection to this kind of commonsensical sense of reality.
Beautiful. Thank you. We're going to get a call, but we're not going to respond directly to the call. What we're going to do is hear the call, and then we're going to do final words. And I'll ask you all to ponder in your final word, maybe to respond to some aspect of the conversation we're about to have. So we're going to do final words in a moment. But first, who is on the phone, Chris?
On the phone, we have Hannah calling from Berlin.
That's fantastic. Hi, Hannah. Can you hear me?
Hi, Al. Hi, yeah. Can you hear me?
I can, absolutely. Hannah, what's your last name?
Judd.
This is Hannah Judd calling from Berlin. Oh, my God, Hannah Judd. Zach, can you believe it? It's Hannah. Hey, Hannah Judd. Everybody loves Hannah Judd. And if you don't know Hannah Judd, you will love what she has to say. Not to put too much pressure on you, Hannah.
Oh, geez. No, I was just thinking, and now I'm going to forget what I was thinking, but a little bit about the way that Dickinson kind of uses the dash, and it's really pushing, right, the poetic form by making, like, space for the silent, but also by, like, saying that there isn't any word that could oversee the possible words, like the imagined word that could go where one might be is always going to be better. So just thinking about that and actually ways that people try to do Orpheus, because I've been listening to the musical Hades sound a lot, but it's one that the sort of the perfect song, the song that will raise the dead, is always one that has to be embedded within the text and the sort of story of like the song about the song. Made me think about the way the dash might be a poem inside a poem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, Hannah Judd, you're killing us. By the way, Max, you definitely have to meet up with Hannah. I don't know if you know Hannah. You were already in Chicago when Hannah was hanging around here. Hannah Judd, would you stay on the line and do a quick final word toward the end? You know our final words thing.
Sure, yeah.
Can you stay on for a sec? I know you have a lot to do.
I don't know. I'm good. I'm here.
Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to call on people for very quick final words. So just a thought about this week. It goes without saying that we want to ballyhoo our office hours. You might not want to just use your final words to ballyhoo office hours, but we encourage everybody to come to office hours, and some of the TAs will be doing Zoom office hours, and we'll be back in a week from now to do another live webcast, so we can just keep talking. So let's start with Gabby, and then after Gabby will be Kate. Final thought. It can be partly responsive to Hannah Judd's comment or anything that's on your mind. Gabby?
Oh, I wasn't ready. Okay.
I can go to Kate first. I can go to Kate first.
All right, go to Kate.
All right. Kate, final thought?
Yes, my very first office hour ever is at 11 tomorrow. So come to that. And I just wanted to say I loved what Hannah said about the dash as sort of indicating a poem inside a poem. And it made me think of Leaves of Grass and the idea of a rhizome with which Whitman begins Song of Myself. And it even sort of visually raises that for me too.
Great, thank you. Gabby, final thought, followed by Knar.
Yeah, I'm going to say one that my office hours are at 11 a.m. Eastern on Mondays. So come to those. What I was going to say is that I think this is a good week for learning a little bit about how to read and talk about poetry. Something that because we have so many students, kind of do a little bit impromptu together in the discussion forums and a little bit here. But I think like both Dickinson and Whitman teach you a little bit about how these sort of like micro movements inside the poetry make the thing we're talking about when we talk about the poem. And that like that kind of go-to cultural standard of like, what did the poem evoke? What did it do? How did it feel? Is like not always how we talk about it. We often talk about these little internal architectures and these little sort of scales that the poem has. And I think this is a good week for like getting a hold of that, especially as new students. And as we move forward, we'll see like how different authors practice this and play with it, because some do it in some pretty incredible ways.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, Gabby. Knar is up, followed by Amber Rose. Final thought?
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about sort of dashes as gashes as well, and just what dashes are there in the world. And I think this was kind of inaugurated by thinking about the brain within its groove in this line, when floods have split the hills, which was all too relevant, right, in the kind of aftermath of Hurricane Ida. So yeah, nothing conclusive, but kind of thinking about, these dashes and gashes that really open up and deform the world in a certain way that then creates a new world or a world kind of otherwise.
Thank you, Knar. Amber Rose, followed by Erica.
For my final thought, I'm also still kind of lingering with the dashes, and I've appreciated the new ways that folks have me thinking about these dashes already. It's so great to come back every year and be like, oh, here's a new thought. But yeah, I'm thinking about the dashes as ramps. Actually, I'm thinking about them visually, like riding up the dash and then just blasting off into the land of possibility.
Whoa.
So carry that visual with you for the rest of the week.
That works really well because the way Dickinson did the dashes, they sort of slant upwards to the right. So that's very cool. They're like rocket launchers. I think Erica had to go to a meeting, so we've missed Erica. So let's go to Max with Allie on deck.
I love that description of the dashes as ramps and burrows. I think that's really cool. And I was having a conversation in my office hours about the horizontality, the longness of the lines in Whitman versus sort of the more vertical ordering of Dickinson's poetry. And I like thinking of the dash, though, in that way of sort of blasting off into whatever is on the sidelines as this sort of a lateral tug. I think that's a really productive way for thinking about it in a way of sort of maybe trying to resolve this distinction between the long lines of Whitman and the short lines of Dickinson. And for Hannah Judge, let's be sure to connect somewhere in Berlin. I'll get your contact.
That's great.
Info,
Max
somehow.
and Hannah, I can put the two of you in touch. Thank you, Max.
Yeah, I'll got my email.
I definitely have your email. So Allie with Lily on deck.
I'm also thinking about Hannah's comment about the dash and the sense of like the dash as ineffability, like built into a worded poem. And there's something super cool about thinking about a certain like reverence for what cannot be said built into what we always think of as like these sublimely articulated nuggets of poems.
Nice. Thank you, Allie. Lily's up with Jason on deck.
I just want to, as my final words, give a shout out to Brooke Roundy and Beth C., who identified in the YouTube chat that they are both back this year for the first time since 2012. And I'm sure there are many others out there who have not checked in with the course since then. So just a big welcome back. And maybe it would be cool for us to do a highlight of some of the many things that are new in the course since then, which there's so many. And also to say that if you liked our conversation about reading Dickinson and Whitman through the lens of the pandemic, Beth C. posted that they created a forum called ED and WW pandemic. If you search ED WW pandemic in the discussion forums, you can find it and continue that convo from the YouTube chat.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lily. Jason, final thought? Jason, did Jason drop off? No, there's Jason. I think you might be muted.
Yeah, my mic was off. My office hours are going to be a Zoom chat with as many people as can honestly fit. And it's 8:00 tomorrow. So it's the last call for office hours or the detention block. So, and I really want to talk about, I'm really excited to talk about Divya Victor's poem in relation to what we've talked about so far.
Great.
So if you were provoked by that, come by. And just as to Hannah's point about the dashes, it made me think about what really has struck me this time are two big words in Dickinson, truth and possibility, and how those two words can reflect different kinds of temporalities. That truth for a long time was a static thing, or truth can be a static thing, and kind of insists on if it's an everlasting truth, there's no change.
Wow.
But possibility indicates an always open future. So we could think of the dashes as kind of the extra chair put out for the unexpected guest.
Oh, unbelievable.
And it's a kind of queer Jewish gesture.
I love it. Jason, you are amazing. Thank you, Jason. It's good to see you. We're going to go to Jake, then Dave, then Hannah Judd. Quick final words. Then there's a couple of us in the room. So Jake and then Dave. Final thought quickly.
So my office hours on Monday nights at midnight Eastern Standard Time, so into Tuesday. 9 o'clock Pacific time, so decentering a little bit the East Coast thing. So folks on the West Coast can post dinner, get their glass of wine and join and hang. And of course, night owls from the East Coast, very welcome too. I just want to repeat a line that Ali said a little bit earlier describing Dickinson. I want another person in my mind. Just such a beautiful line. Like that's a poem in and of itself. And that's staying with me and just like resonating. So beautiful. Thank you, Ali, for that line.
That was great. Ali said a whole bunch of amazing things. Dave Poplar, I think. No, there you are, Dave. Final thought?
Just a quick thought, just another way to think about dashes. And I feel like I mention this every year at ModPo, but I once had a guitar teacher who told me, sometimes the notes that you don't play are just as important as the ones you do. Sometimes they're more important. And now as I look at dashes, I think maybe that's the same sort of concept, or at least one way to think about it. And the other quick point is that I have office hours today at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I wanted to plug that.
Dave.
That's
Thanks. Thank you so much. Hannah Judd, what a setup. Hannah Judd, who cares about unusual music.
I was just thinking actually about how in Bach, the dashes then would be sort of the implied, at least in the cello suite, but a lot of other ones, the space for the listener to sort of participate in the music that you're filling and the through lines of the multiple parts that are sort of implied here and there, and you're listening for the other side of it. And just the way that then, right, like the reader gets to participate, like she's making space actually for us, like speaking of who there's space for inside of the poem to really join in and to really sort of hear that space.
That's great. Thank you, Hannah Judd. Much love to you in Berlin. So glad that you called.
Hi, everybody. I miss you all.
Miss you too, and I'm so glad you're doing ModPo this year. Thank you. Sophia Naz, you came all this way. You had a lot of other things to do. We were just part of your itinerary, but thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. It was a pleasure. This afternoon, we're going to hope to get Sophia into our studio to record some of the new poems, and I hope in your final thought you will repeat the name of your new book so people can get it. Sophia, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Al. It's wonderful to be here. And for those people who are suffering, I just say this. It's 2021, but what does that mean when we're all doing time in COVID-19?
Whoa, you just wrote a little poem there.
I was thinking about the temporality and the repetition. And just to speak to Hannah, I just wanted to say that I'm loving the analogy to the music, because Whitman seems like an endless cascade of notes, and then you get to Emily, and it's like this wonderful, minimalistic music, and it's the pauses. The pauses is what makes her music.
Yeah.
That I'm going to. There's a lot of music in my new book. It's Open Zero, and it is available on Amazon. Shameless author plug. And I wrote this book after my home was burnt to cinders in the fires of 2017. So it's a kind of a phoenix. It is literally making it's language. Language is the world. And my world was destroyed, but I made another world out of language.
Yeah.
So that's it.
That is great. Who wouldn't want to buy that book and try to understand what that's all about?
Thank you.
We certainly will. Thank you, and thanks for visiting us. Lainey Brown, thank you. Your first webcast. It was fun. You've done a webcast before, but not in the driver's seat. Thank you. I just want to hold up a book. Sorry, Zach, I'm messing up your camera work. I just recently read this book. It's about the poet's novel. Lainey Brown has been working hard at this and just published a kind of companion book, which is a big anthology of essays about poets' novels. So I just wanted to plug this. I read it recently. This is Lainey's effort, and illustrated, but this is Lainey's effort at explaining that. and it's brilliant. So thank you.
Thank
Lainey,
you,
final
Al.
thoughts?
I'm sitting on a chair, which I'm imagining as a dash. Thank you, Jason, for that image. And I'm thinking about Hannah's speaking about the dash as the poem in the poem, which makes me think about our conversation as on the poem as being inside this global room.
Nice.
The global room. So a lot of gratitude
I love that.
for everybody being here.
And speaking of the global room, a couple shout outs as we wind up. Bonita Cape on the eastern edge of New Zealand, an old friend of ModPo who's had a couple of really difficult years and is back. Welcome, Bonita. Welcome back. Janelle Harvey, this is the third year in ModPo, a Philadelphian, writes, I've been a poet since I was 13 years old, but I had not started classifying myself as one until my early 20s when I encountered a local poetry and spoken word group encouraged me that you do not have to be well-known or wealthy to hold the title of poet. I have not been motivated to create in over a year, and I feel out of place, and I have a desire to regain the craft, and that is why Janelle is with us. And Janelle, I just want to encourage you to come visit us at the Writers' House, and we will try to encourage you to feel not out of place saying that you're a poet. George Douglas is in Glasgow, an artist and a healthcare worker. To say the least, this has been a difficult time for a healthcare worker in Glasgow in particular. Just wanted to say thank you, George. Thanks for what you've done, and I'm so glad that you're attracted as an artist to what we're doing in ModPo. And finally, Anu from India, second year in the course, writes, quote, the world may be falling apart, but ModPo is here to remind us that beauty still exists. David Herring calling from Dorset, T calling from near Manila, Tan calling from Siberia on the way to Prague, and Hannah Judd from Berlin. Those are very cool calls. I mean, all four of them were from outside the United States. It's amazing. We'll be back in a week. Thank you, TAs. You are marvelous and smart and inspiring. And wow, it's great to start a 10th ModPo season with such great people. Thank you to Chris and Zach and Zelda, who is in and out helping. Thank you guys. You do amazing work. I think we all take for granted what those phone calls are. You know, it's like, just call. And it's really a hard thing to do, not to mention all the camera work. So thank you guys. And we will see you a week from today. Does anybody remember what time the webcast is next week?
Ooh, I think it's early.
Early for us?
8:30 possibly?
Can't be as early as 8:30, but we'll definitely send
It's 9:30.
9:30 a.m. Eastern time. And somebody is shaking. Jake, is that a little too early? That's 6:30. Your kids are blabbing by then, aren't they? He's shaking his head. All right. Sorry, West Coasters. We will see you later. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great week.